He was publicly beaten while strangers laughed and filmed. But instead of accepting it, he did something nobody expected. Something that would completely change his life. Want to know what happened next? This is the incredible true story of Rajesh, a story of courage, education, and refusing to accept the role society assigned him. Quick question: where are you watching this from? Comment your city below, I'd love to know. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more real-life stories of people who fought back and won. Now, let's dive into Rajesh's journey. Rajesh stood at the corner of the crowded street in Mumbai's Dharavi area, watching the morning chaos unfold like it did every single day. The smell of street food mixed with open sewage filled his nostrils, a scent so familiar it had become part of his identity. He was 23 years old, though his tired eyes made him look older. His father had died when he was 12, crushed under the weight of death and despair, leaving Rajesh, his mother, and two younger sisters to survive on whatever they could find. People pushed past him without acknowledgement, as if he were invisible. To most of them, he was just another face in the endless sea of poverty that defined this part of the city. His clothes were the same ones he'd worn for 3 years, washed and rewashed until the fabric had become paper-thin. His shoes, if you could call them that, were held together with wire and hope. But Rajesh had learned long ago that complaining changed nothing. Survival required silence, acceptance, and the ability to endure humiliation as if it were just another weather condition. He worked at a small tea stall owned by Seth Ramesh, a man whose cruelty seemed to grow with each passing year. Rajesh arrived before dawn to prepare the chai, clean the glasses, and set up the stall. He worked until late evening, sometimes midnight, depending on Seth's mood. For this, he received 300 rupees a day, barely enough to buy rice and dal for his family. There were no Sundays off, no sick days, no dignity. When customers complained about the tea being too hot or too sweet, Seth would slap Rajesh across the face in front of everyone, screaming that he was useless, that he should be grateful for even having a job. "You are lucky I don't throw you out like the garbage you are," Seth would say, spitting betel juice on the ground near Rajesh's feet. The other workers would look away, grateful it wasn't them being humiliated that day. Rajesh would bow his head, apologize, and continue working. What choice did he have? His sisters needed to eat. His mother's health was failing. Dignity was a luxury for people who could afford it. At night, lying on the thin mat in their one-room tenement, Rajesh would stare at the ceiling and wonder if this was all life would ever be. The sounds of the slums surrounded him: crying babies, arguing couples, coughing elders, rats scurrying through walls. His mother would sometimes reach over and touch his hand, saying nothing, because what was there to say? They both knew the statistics. People like them didn't escape. They endured until they died, and then their children endured the same. The cycle was ancient, unbreakable, written in the very foundation of society. But somewhere deep inside Rajesh, beneath the layers of exhaustion and resignation, a small ember still burned. He didn't know what it was or where it came from. Perhaps it was the memory of his father, who had once told him that a man's worth wasn't determined by his birth but by his courage. Perhaps it was simply the human spirit's refusal to completely surrender. Whatever it was, it kept him breathing, kept him moving forward, even when forward seemed to lead nowhere at all. It was a Tuesday morning in July when everything shifted. The monsoon rains had flooded the streets, turning them into rivers of garbage and sewage. Rajesh had arrived at the tea stall at 5 in the morning, wading through knee-deep water, his already worn shoes completely destroyed by the acidic mixture. Seth arrived 2 hours later, dry and comfortable, having taken an auto rickshaw. He immediately began shouting at Rajesh for not having the stall perfectly organized, even though Rajesh had been fighting the flooding for hours. "You useless dog!" Seth screamed, his face red with rage. "Why is there water inside the stall? Why haven't you cleaned it? Do you have brain or just shit in your skull?" Rajesh tried to explain about the flooding, about how he'd been trying to salvage the supplies, but Seth wasn't interested in explanations. He grabbed a wooden stick they used to stir large pots of chai, and struck Rajesh across the back. Once, twice, 3 times. The pain was sharp, but Rajesh had felt worse. What broke something inside him wasn't the physical violence but what happened next. A group of college students had gathered nearby, waiting for the rain to stop. They watched the beating with their smartphones out, some recording, others laughing. One of them, a girl in expensive clothes, said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Look at that. This is why these people never improve. They are born to be beaten. It's in their karma." Her friends laughed. Someone made a joke about street entertainment. They shared the video on social media with hashtags making fun of poor people. And in that moment, as Rajesh stood there dripping with dirty water and blood, something fundamental cracked inside him. Not his spirit, but his acceptance. For the first time in his life, he felt not just pain but rage. Not just humiliation but rebellion. The ember inside him suddenly caught flame. He looked up at Sep, who was preparing to strike again, and something in Rajesh's eyes made the older man pause. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something Seth had never seen in Rajesh before, something that made him unconsciously take a step back. Rajesh didn't say anything. He simply straightened his back, dropped the cloth he'd been holding, and walked away from the stall. Seth shouted after him, threatening him, cursing his family, but Rajesh didn't turn around. He walked through the flooded streets with no destination in mind, just the overwhelming need to move, to not be in that place anymore. His mother would ask where his day's wages were. His sisters would go hungry tonight. He had no plan, no backup, no safety net. What he'd just done was foolish, maybe even suicidal in their circumstances. But for the first time in his life, Rajesh had chosen his dignity over his survival, and that choice, terrifying as it was, felt like the first real decision he'd ever made. The rain continued to pour, washing away the blood from his wounds, and Rajesh kept walking, not knowing where he was going but knowing he could never go back. 3 days passed. 3 days of hunger, shame, and crushing doubt. Rajesh had tried to find other work, knocking on doors of shops, restaurants, construction sites, anywhere that might hire a man with no skills and no references. Every door closed in his face. Some managers didn't even let him finish his request before waving him away. Others listened with mock sympathy before explaining that they had hundreds of applicants. Why would they choose him? His mother didn't speak to him. Not in anger, but in heartbroken silence. She would look at him with eyes that said everything. How could you be so selfish, so reckless with our survival? His younger sister, Priya, had stopped going to the municipal school because she was helping a neighbor wash clothes for 30 rupees a day. His other sister, Meena, was only 14 but had already received inquiries about marriage from men 3 times her age. The walls were closing in. Rajesh spent his days walking the city, searching for opportunities that didn't exist. He watched successful people in their clean clothes and air-conditioned cars, living lives so far removed from his reality, they might as well have been from different planets. He saw young men his age laughing in cafes, discussing their college courses and career plans, problems that seemed like luxuries to him. The distance between their world and his felt infinite, unbridgeable, as fixed as the stars. At night, lying hungry in the dark, Rajesh questioned everything he'd done. Had he been a fool to walk away? Was pride really worth his family's suffering? The society he lived in had rules, unspoken but absolute. People like him were supposed to accept their position, serve without complaint, be grateful for scraps. By refusing to be beaten, by walking away with his head up, he'd broken those rules. And society was now punishing him for it, as it always punished those who forgot their place. He thought about going back to Sep, apologizing, begging for his job back. The thought made him physically sick, but what alternative did he have? His education had stopped at 8th grade when his father died. He had no specialized skills, no connections, no capital to start even the smallest business. The statistics were clear. Social mobility in India was among the lowest in the world. People born poor died poor. Their children continued the cycle. This was reality, supported by data, by history, by the experiences of millions. But then he remembered the college girl's face, her casual cruelty, the way she'd looked at him like he was less than human. He remembered Saint's stick, the laughter of the crowd, the videos shared for entertainment. Something inside him hardened. He realized that going back would mean more than just accepting a job. It would mean accepting that they were right about him, that he truly was worthless, that he deserved to be treated as less than human. And that acceptance, he now understood, would be a death more final than starvation. On the fourth day, desperate and dizzy from hunger, Rajesh was sitting on the steps of a railway overbridge, watching trains pass beneath. He wasn't thinking about jumping, not exactly, but he also wasn't thinking about not jumping. He was in that gray space where the present is unbearable and the future is impossible to imagine. A man sat down next to him, uninvited. He was older, maybe 60, with simple clothes but clean, with the kind of calm presence that came from having survived life's storms. "Bad day?" the man asked in Hindi. Rajesh almost laughed at the understatement but remained silent. The man didn't push, just sat there watching the trains like Rajesh was. After a long silence, he spoke again. 20 years ago, I sat on these same steps. I'd just lost my third business. I had debts I couldn't pay, a family I couldn't feed, and no reason to believe anything would ever change. You know what I was thinking about?" Rajesh glanced at him. The man smiled slightly. "I was thinking about how everyone was right about me. I was from a lower caste, little education, no connections. The world had told me my entire life that people like me don't succeed, and I'd just proven them right 3 times. I thought, maybe they know something I don't. Maybe I should stop fighting and just accept my position." He paused, pulling out a small package of biscuits from his bag. He offered half to Rajesh, who hesitated but then took them, too hungry to refuse. "So what changed?" Rajesh asked quietly. The man looked at him with eyes that had seen real hardship. "I realized something important. The world's opinion of me was based on my circumstances, not my potential. They looked at where I was and assumed that's all I could ever be. But I was looking at where I could go. Those were two completely different things." He ate a biscuit thoughtfully. "The system is designed to keep people like us down. That's not a conspiracy theory, it's just how power works. It maintains itself. But the system has cracks. And if you are smart enough, stubborn enough, and lucky enough, you can slip through those cracks." The man's name was Suresh. He now owned a small manufacturing business, employed 30 people, and sent his children to private schools. He told Rajesh his story, how he'd started by collecting plastic bottles and selling them to recyclers, how he'd saved every paisa for 3 years, how he'd learned about plastic processing from a YouTube video at a public library, how he'd bought one small machine on loan and started producing plastic containers in a rented shed. It hadn't been glamorous. It hadn't been quick. But it had been possible. "I'm not going to lie to you," Suresh said, looking directly at Rajesh. "It's harder for people like us. Much harder. We don't have safety nets. We can't afford to fail. We start with nothing and have to build everything ourselves. But the question isn't whether it's fair. It's not fair. The question is whether you are going to let that unfairness define your entire life, or whether you are going to fight anyway." He stood up, preparing to leave. "There's a library 2 kilometers from here. It has free internet, computers you can use for an hour a day, books on every subject. Start there. Learn something nobody expects you to know. That's the first crack in the system." Suresh wrote down his phone number on a piece of paper. "When you've learned something, call me. If you are serious about changing your situation, I'll help you take the next step. But you have to take the first one yourself." Then he left, disappearing into the crowd, leaving Rajesh sitting there with half a package of biscuits, a phone number, and the first genuine hope he'd felt in years. The trains continued to pass below, but Rajesh was no longer watching them. He was thinking about libraries, computers, and cracks in the system. For the first time since he'd walked away from Saint's tea stall, he felt something other than despair. He felt possibility. The library was called the Citizens Knowledge Center, a government initiative that few people knew about and even fewer used. It was located in a rundown building between a medical clinic and a motorcycle repair shop. Rajesh walked through its doors the next morning, feeling out of place among the books and computers. A librarian, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, helped him register for a library card. It was free. Everything was free. He could barely believe it. Rajesh started with the basics. He hadn't touched a computer in years, not since a brief computer literacy program in 7th grade. The librarian showed him how to use the internet, how to search for information, how to access free educational resources. For the first hour, he just clicked randomly, overwhelmed by the infinite amount of information suddenly available to him. Then he remembered Suresh's advice: learn something nobody expects you to know. He spent the next 3 weeks in that library every single day, using his allotted hour to learn about digital marketing. He didn't know why he chose that subject specifically. Maybe because it seemed to be everywhere, maybe because it required no physical materials or capital to start, just knowledge and internet access. He watched YouTube tutorials, read articles, took notes in a borrowed notebook. He learned about social media marketing, search engine optimization, content creation, email marketing, and analytics. The knowledge came slowly at first, like water through dense rock. Many concepts were completely foreign. He had to teach himself basic English first, since most of the best resources were in English. He used Google Translate constantly, switching between Hindi and English, gradually building his understanding. Other library users sometimes stared at him, this poor-looking young man completely absorbed in computer screens, his lips moving as he silently repeated English phrases, trying to commit them to memory. His family situation remained desperate. Priya was still washing clothes. His mother was still silent. Meena was resisting marriage proposals, but the pressure was increasing. Rajesh found small jobs here and there, unloading trucks, cleaning shops after closing, anything that would bring in a little money and still leave him time for the library. He slept 4 hours a night. He ate 1 meal a day. But he studied. After 3 weeks, he called Suresh. I've learned the basics of digital marketing, he said, his voice uncertain. I don't have any experience, but I understand the concepts. I've even created some sample social media campaigns just for practice. There was a pause on the other end. Then Suresh said, come to my factory tomorrow morning. Let's see what you can do. That night, Rajesh couldn't sleep. Not from worry or fear, but from something he'd almost forgotten: anticipation of opportunity. He'd taken the first step through the crack in the system. Now he needed to prove he could keep moving forward. Suresh's factory was modest, producing plastic containers for food storage and small household items. It was clean, organized, and employed around 30 workers who seemed reasonably treated, a sharp contrast to Sain's tea stall. Suresh greeted Rajesh in his small office, a space filled with samples, invoices, and a single computer. So you know digital marketing, Suresh said, not unkindly but with clear skepticism. Tell me, how could someone like you help a business like mine? Rajesh had prepared for this moment. Despite his nervousness, he spoke clearly. Sir, your products are good quality, I can see that. But you are selling only to local distributors who probably squeeze your margins. You have no direct connection to customers. No online presence. If someone searches for plastic containers in Mumbai, they find big companies or cheap imported products. You are invisible to most potential customers. He paused, gathering courage. I can change that. I can create social media pages, showcase your products, tell your story, reach customers directly. It won't cost much, just time and strategy. Suresh leaned back in his chair, studying Rajesh. And what do you want in return? Rajesh had thought about this carefully. For the first month, nothing. Let me prove I can create results. I'll work for free, use the library computers, and build your online presence. If after 1 month you see value in what I'm doing, pay me what you think it's worth. If you see no value, we part ways with no hard feelings. It was a massive risk. A month of work with no guarantee of payment when his family desperately needed money now. But Rajesh understood that people like Suresh didn't take chances on people like him without proof. Suresh smiled for the first time. You understand how this works. That's smart. Okay, you have your month. But I'm going to check your progress every week. If I see you are wasting time or doing nothing, we stop immediately. He handed Rajesh a folder with information about the business, products, prices, target customers, competitors. Show me what free education and determination can do. Rajesh took the folder like it was made of gold. This was his chance, maybe his only chance, to prove that he was more than what society had labeled him. The next 30 days were the hardest Rajesh had ever worked. He created Facebook and Instagram accounts for Suresh Plastics. He photographed products using his mother's ancient mobile phone, learning to frame shots in good lighting to make cheap plastic containers look appealing. He wrote posts in simple Hindi and English, telling the story of a small Indian manufacturer fighting against cheap imports, emphasizing quality and local jobs. He joined local business groups online, engaged with potential customers, answered questions about products. He studied successful business pages for hours, analyzing what made people engage, share, and ultimately buy. He learned about posting times, hashtag strategies, customer psychology, and visual storytelling. The library's 1-hour limit became a challenge, so he learned to work with extreme efficiency, preparing everything offline and using his internet time only for posting and engagement. He filled notebooks with strategies, content calendars, and response templates. After 2 weeks, the pages had 300 followers. After 3 weeks, 800. More importantly, actual customers started reaching out, asking about products, prices, and delivery. Suresh was getting inquiries he'd never received before. By the end of the month, Suresh Plastics had received 27 direct orders through social media, small orders but from customers who paid retail prices instead of wholesale, meaning significantly better margins. Rajesh presented his results to Suresh with detailed analytics he'd learned to track: engagement rates, reach, conversion percentages, and revenue generated. Suresh looked at the numbers for a long time. Then he looked at Rajesh. Nobody expected this. I didn't expect this. You took knowledge freely available to everyone and actually used it to create something valuable. Do you know how rare that is? He named a salary, 2,000 rupees a month to start, with increases based on continued results. It wasn't much by middle-class standards, but it was more than Rajesh had ever earned, and it came with dignity. No beatings. No humiliation. Just work and results. Rajesh accepted, and for the first time in months, he went home with good news. 6 months into his work with Suresh Plastics, Rajesh had transformed the business's market presence. The social media following had grown to over 15,000 people. More crucially, online sales now represented 25% of total revenue, and these sales came at much better margins than traditional distribution channels. Suresh had given Rajesh two raises and a small desk in the office. Other employees, who initially viewed him with suspicion, now greeted him respectfully. He was becoming a valued member of the team. But Rajesh wasn't satisfied. He'd proven he could execute, but he wanted to learn strategy. He started reading business books borrowed from the library, studying case studies of successful Indian companies, understanding supply chains, pricing strategies, and market positioning. He noticed that Suresh was losing money on shipping because he used multiple small vendors without negotiating power. Rajesh researched logistics companies, compared rates, and presented a proposal to consolidate shipping that would save 30,000 rupees monthly. Suresh implemented it immediately. He noticed inefficiencies in inventory management that caused product shortages and overstock simultaneously. He taught himself basic Excel, created inventory tracking systems, and reduced waste by 15%. He suggested product line extensions based on customer feedback from social media, colored containers instead of just clear ones, smaller sizes for single people, and sets for newly married couples. Each suggestion was based on actual data from customer interactions, and each one increased sales. Suresh began consulting Rajesh on business decisions, something that shocked the older employees who would been there for years. But Suresh understood what others didn't. Rajesh brought a different perspective precisely because he came from outside the traditional business world. He understood struggling customers because he was one. He understood digital communication because he'd had to learn it from scratch. He worked with an intensity that came from knowing what the alternative looked like. Rajesh's family situation had stabilized. Priya had returned to school. His mother's health improved with better nutrition and less stress. Meena was still in the house. The marriage proposals politely declined for now. They'd moved from their one-room tenement to a small two-room apartment in a slightly better area. It wasn't luxury, but it was progress. Real, measurable, undeniable progress. And that progress was entirely the result of Rajesh's decision to walk away from humiliation and fight for something better. But Rajesh was also learning the complicated truth about social mobility. Yes, he'd improved his situation dramatically. But he was also acutely aware of how much luck had been involved. Meeting Suresh at the exact right moment, Suresh being the rare person willing to take a chance, the library being available, nothing catastrophic happening to derail his progress. He thought about the millions of people just like him who didn't get these opportunities, who worked just as hard but never found their crack in the system. Success, he realized, was part merit, part timing, part privilege, and part pure randomness. This understanding made him both grateful and determined to help others when he could. 2 years after walking away from Saint's tea stall, Rajesh stood in front of a small office space he'd just rented. The sign above the door read, Digital Reach Solutions, Marketing for Small Businesses. After proving his value at Suresh Plastics, he'd been approached by 3 other small manufacturers asking for similar help. Suresh, rather than preventing him from serving competitors, had encouraged him to start his own consultancy. "I've benefited from your skills," Suresh said. "Now let other businesses benefit you. And I'll be your first permanent client." Rajesh had saved enough to hire 2 people, Priya, his sister, who would develop strong writing skills and would handle content creation, and Anil, a young man from his old neighborhood who reminded Rajesh of himself 2 years ago, hungry and desperate for opportunity. He paid them fairly, treated them with respect, and taught them everything he knew. His business model was simple: help small Indian manufacturers and service providers establish online presence and reach customers directly, charging fees based on results rather than expensive retainers. Within 6 months, Digital Reach Solutions had 12 clients. Within a year, 35. Rajesh hired 4 more people, all from poor backgrounds, all trained from scratch. He didn't require degrees or previous experience, just willingness to learn and work ethic. His office became known in the neighborhood as a place where poor kids could learn valuable skills and earn decent money. He taught evening classes at the Citizens Knowledge Center, passing on his knowledge to others still looking for their crack in the system. The growth wasn't smooth. There were months when clients didn't pay on time, and Rajesh had to use personal savings to cover salaries. There were competitors with more experience and connections who tried to undercut him. There were times when the old insecurities returned, whispers in his mind saying he didn't belong in the business world, that he was still just that beaten boy from the tea stall. But now Rajesh had something powerful, proof of what was possible. Every client's success, every employee who improved their family situation, every young person who learned digital skills, all of it reinforced a truth the old world had tried to hide from him. One afternoon, Rajesh was walking through his old neighborhood when he passed Sage's tea stall. Seth was still there, older, meaner, beating a new young worker for some minor mistake. Their eyes met for a moment. Seth's face showed confusion, trying to place this confident young man in clean business casual clothes. Then recognition dawned, followed by shock, then something that might have been fear. Rajesh didn't stop, didn't gloat, didn't say anything. He simply walked past, his head high, his dignity intact. That was victory enough. Rajesh's story spread through the slums like wildfire, told and retold, embellished and simplified, becoming almost mythic. But Rajesh was careful whenever young people approached him seeking advice. He never pretended it had been easy. He never claimed anyone could do it with simple determination. He was honest about the role of luck, timing, and the generosity of people like Suresh. But he also emphasized the part that was controllable, the decision to learn, the willingness to work without immediate reward, the refusal to accept humiliation as a permanent condition. The system is designed to keep you down, he would tell them, echoing Suresh's words from that day on the bridge. That's reality. But the system isn't perfect. It has cracks. Your job is to find those cracks, slip through them, and once you are through, help others follow. Education is a crack. Technology is a crack. Meeting the right person at the right time is a crack. You can't control everything, but you can control your preparation for when opportunity appears. And you can control whether you accept being treated as less than human or whether you fight back with every tool available to you. Today, Rajesh Kumar, age 25, employs 18 people and serves 53 small business clients across Mumbai. His mother lives in a proper apartment with a bathroom and kitchen. His sisters are in college, studying computer science and business management. He's not rich by urban middle-class standards, but he's secure, respected, and most importantly, dignified. Every day, he remembers what it felt like to be beaten in the street while people laughed and recorded. And every day, he works to make sure one more person doesn't have to endure that fate. He didn't change the system. The system is too big, too entrenched for one person to change. But he changed his destiny within that system, and in doing so, showed others that change was possible. Not easy, not guaranteed, but possible. And possibility, he learned, was the most revolutionary force in the world. It was the difference between accepting your assigned role and writing your own story. Between being defined by where you started and being defined by where you decided to go. Between being treated as less than human and fighting back to claim your full humanity. That fight, Rajesh understood, never truly ends. But every small victory makes the next one more achievable, and that's how destinies are rewritten, one stubborn decision at a time.